You're listening to Midlife State of Mind podcast, hosted by Erin, a midlife gal who dishes on all the challenges and opportunities that come with this middle section of your life. Each episode, you'll find yourself going between laughter and tears as she covers all the topics you need to know about midlife.
Welcome back to Midlife State of Mind. I'm your host, Erin. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode today. I think often in society, there is this negative view around aging and getting older. And I think one of the ways that we can really start to shift the ideas around aging is to reframe how we think about aging. For me, I've been embracing all of the wonderful things that midlife has to offer, from being an empty nester to having more time for myself, to exploring hobbies and passions. And I think one of the really sweet things of getting older is the ability that I have had to really dive into getting to know myself better. I think that in my 20s, I thought I kind of knew who I was, and then I started having kids and was basically consumed for a number of years in raising kids and just all of the things that come with that. And for most women, I think from, maybe late 20s through their early 40s, you're just consumed in a career, or you're raising kids, you're running a household. It's like all of the things that have to get done every day are your focus. And so you don't really have a lot of time to be introspective about yourself. And I know I talk a lot about living in the moment. And when you're living in the moment, I think sometimes you don't have the ability to be introspective. So occasionally, it's really nice to step back from the moment and be the observer of yourself, and to notice your patterns and your tendencies in your relationships with your significant other, with your children, with your parents, with your siblings, with your friends, with your coworkers, just, people that you in general come in contact with on a daily basis. Also being curious about just how you react to things that happen that are outside of your control. And so I have spent the last, probably couple years. It probably started actually around COVID, because what else do we have to do besides be at home and be introspective? And first we were terrified, and then we were bored. And I took some courses online and started doing lots of self-assessment tests and all of that good stuff. And it's really interesting, some of the things that I found out about myself through some of the tests, as well as some of the things that I already knew, some of the things that didn't ring true necessarily. And one of the things that I think is really interesting too is, so everybody's very familiar with Myers-Briggs, and I am an ENFJ, I believe, which extroverted. And, when people meet me, they do think I'm very outgoing. I don't have a problem going into new situations. I don't have social anxiety. I can talk to a brick wall. But the funniest part about that is, even though I classify, and every time I've taken the test, I'm always an E. I'm never an I. I am an I. I'm an introverted extrovert, or I'm extroverted introvert. And it's taken me until my 50s to figure out that actually I am an introvert. Because one of the differences between being an extrovert and introvert is, how do you recharge your battery? And even though I'm great in social situations, and I can be recharged from some interactions, a lot of times in big groups, things like that, or if I have to be on in front of a group, it does drain my social battery. And the way that I recharge is, I will come home, like if I've gone to an event, and then I have to either maybe sometimes soak in a hot bath, or I'll read, and it takes me a really long time to come down and recharge. But I always get classified as an E, as an extrovert. So Myers-Briggs is a scientifically based insight that categorizes personalities into 16 possible types and identifies common behaviors. Everybody's probably taken Myers-Briggs. If you've taken a job, they probably have given you some type of personality test, and it's usually pretty spot on for your personality traits. There's also another test called DISC. It stands for Dominance, Influence, Steadiness, and Conscientiousness. This is also a corporate test. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, for a brief hot moment after my youngest went away to college, I got my real estate license. And then I was just like, oh, what are you even doing, woman? You don't like paperwork. So that's when I started to pursue becoming a functional medicine practitioner. I'm about halfway through my accreditation. It's about a 3-year program. So DISC, I took it when I was a realtor, and it discerns behavior styles and personality traits and kind of gives you, usually you're really strong in one or two areas, less so in other areas. So all of these tests are fallible, but they do start to give you some insight. And it was really interesting for me to find out that I'm really high in D and I'm really high in I, and I'm not very high in S or C, even though I think that I'm really steady and conscientious, but apparently the test doesn't think that. Another one something that I've done for years, and I love this test, I've had my husband do it and all of my boys, is the Enneagram. And this is a model of the human psyche that defines 9 personality types. So 1 through 9, things like reformer, helper, there's all these different types. And the Enneagram is thought to be traced back to the works of a Christian mystic who lived in 4th century Egypt. And it has a spiritual aspect to it. The Catholic Church has used it. But for me, it's really been spot on. I'm a 2, I'm a helper, big surprise. And it's really funny, years ago when I was doing my yoga therapy training, I was training with a gentleman by the name of Matthew Sanford, who has the Mind Body Institute out of Minneapolis. He is a paraplegic, I believe, and he was coming in to do a couple weekends of training. And I kept asking questions that had a slant towards being a fixer. And he's like, "You are a fixer, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yes." And he's like, "You can't fix people." And I was like, "Why not?" So the Enneagram just absolutely solidified. I'm a helper. I like to be useful. I like to help people. And I have to really be cautious about not overstepping boundaries with people because I can't fix people. And then it sets up this dynamic when I do try to fix people and then they don't want to be fixed, which I don't blame them. Then it can be, give a little bit of tension. And I've learned that with my kids. And in fact, it's a really hard one. Go listen to last week's episode on validation if you want to hear more about that. Another test is called 16 Personalities. And this is the one that I actually did during COVID when I took a Yale class on happiness. It covers the 5 big personality traits: mind, energy, nature, tactics, and identity. But it ranks you with these 16 different traits from highest to lowest. And it was really interesting to me because I wanted to be classified as competent leader, all these traits that I thought were what I want to be, but I'm not. My number 1 was love of learning and then being a helper and, all of that good stuff. So each test that I've taken has just reinforced basically my personality traits. And I'm like, I just can't deny it. And then another one is called High 5, and it's a strengths test, and it measures your strengths and unique attributes to help you succeed in your work, in your relationships, and even in school. I have not actually taken this test, but I'm going to because I'm really interested to see how it classifies me with my strengths and how it compares to the 16 personalities test. And I'm going to link all of these tests in the show notes so that you can take them, and it'd be interesting after you take them, you can see, is there a common thread? The last one I'm going to mention is one called Who Am I? It's a visual DNA test. And this one is just one of the more fun personality tests where you have a group of photos and you pick your favorite one. And then the test analyzes your choices and gives you your outlook and your approach to life. I took it. It was really fun. I'm actually the captain, which is an influential achiever. I think it's really interesting to have this time of life where things have kind of slowed down in family, maybe in your job, you're not coasting, but you've kind of risen to the top. And so now you're not fighting your way to the top of the corporate ladder. And so you're able to be a little bit more curious, to know thyself. I think that was a Shakespeare quote. So like I said, I'm going to link all of these in the show notes so that you can take the tests. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear from you. You can share your thoughts with me on Instagram or Facebook, Midlife State of Mind Podcast. You can also head to my website, midlifestateofmindpodcast.com, and you can send me a message there. If you are a new listener to the podcast, welcome to the conversation. I would love to have you hit the follow button so that you can stay in the loop whenever a new episode releases each week. If there is any episode that has particularly resonated with you and you enjoy the content that I create, I would be very grateful if you would leave me a rating and a written review on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Lastly, if you're interested in some additional ways that you can support the podcast, take a look at the show notes and you'll see a list of my favorite things. These are all products that I use on a regular basis and I love, and I share them with any of my best girlfriends. And if you do choose to purchase any of the products with any of the links, then the podcast just earns a small commission that helps to offset the costs of producing it. My podcast is a place where we can inspire each other to make positive changes and embrace all that midlife has to offer. Thank you so much for listening today. I'll be back next week with another episode. See you then. Bye.
This has been an E Squared production.